Hello, everyone. We will do a nice slow start as we get going here. We've got a very packed agenda today. We want to get an opportunity to let everyone have a chance to speak we've got lined up. So as folks are getting logged in, we will begin to move through some of our beginning housekeeping type of items. So welcome to our webinar where we're going to discuss our Ebus Phase 2 project. So I'm going to turn the mic over to Jenny, and she's going to handle our land acknowledgement.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jenny Bott. As a resident of Calgary, Alberta, I respectfully acknowledge that I am located on Treaty 7 territory, a traveling route, gathering place, and meeting grounds for Indigenous peoples, including the Siksika Nation, the Piikani Nation, the Kainai Nation, the Iyetkastoni Nakota Nation, consisting of the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney bands, and the people of Tsuut'ina Nation. The city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Districts 5 and 6. Beyond these, I would like to acknowledge that CUTRIC's actions beyond the land acknowledgement. So we have a gender and racial diversity policy in place that encourages the hiring of diverse voices. We support Indigenous-led businesses when possible, with contracts to support economic growth within and among our Indigenous communities. We support ongoing research and federal investment into the exploration, investigation, and analysis of missing and murdered Indigenous persons and the mass and unmarked graves of children that went missing in the residential school system in Canada. We strive to make Canada a greener place and support climate change initiatives, including through innovation that supports better mobility in Indigenous communities. As a bit of housekeeping, I'd just like to remind everyone that we are hosting today's event using the webinar format of Zoom. So in this format, attendees will be unable to use their audio and video. However, you can use the chat and Q&A features at the bottom of your screen to communicate with us. And likewise, we will be dropping some links in the chat as relevant to the presentation. There will be a Q&A portion at the end of the webinar. So if time permits, you may also use the raise hand function and we can unmute you to speak. There is also a live transcript button at the bottom, and you can use it if you want to turn on your closed captions. Turning it over back to you, Chas.
Thank you very much, Jenny. So today you'll see our agenda. We've got, like I had said earlier, it's a jam-packed, full of exciting things here. So we're going to do begin with an introduction here at the beginning of CUTRIC and membership benefits. Then we're going to do an overview of our phase 1. You'll have a summary as well as talking about the data we received during phase 1. And then we have speakers here today. We have Gerald with Brampton Transit and Sunny with CSA. Then we'll be moving in to discuss our phase 2 and the outline, as well as next steps. And Josepa Petrunik will be joining us as well for that portion. And then we'll have a 5-minute Q&A at the end. I'm happy to stay on a little later for folks if we have lots of questions, though. We can move into the next slide. And we'll hand it over to Majdi.
Thanks, Jess. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Majdi El Sadiq, the Business Development and Membership Engagement Officer at CUTRIC. If you are new to CUTRIC and this is your first webinar, CUTRIC is a member-owned nonprofit technology consortium. We support public transit agencies in decarbonizing their fleets. We also collaborate with organizations on rail and academic initiatives. We're also proudly recognized as the Government of Canada's Zero Emission Transit Fund National Planning Service. Organizations join our consortium for many reasons. I would like to take a moment to highlight the membership benefits. If you're not yet a member, I hope this information gives you a reason to consider the membership. And for our valued members, this is an opportunity to remind you of the benefits your membership provides. So CUTRIC membership offers values, whether your focus is on business development networking, or you want to learn about zero emission transit and smart mobility, whether you want access to consultant services, or get involved in advocacy and dialogue. And the last piece is the project development, which Jess will talk more about. Next slide, please. So one of the greatest value CUTRIC membership provide for our members is access to members-only technical session and planning workshop that includes our zero-emission bus committees, power provider and utilities, and also the bi-monthly members meeting. You also can access information about our other members, including their direct contact information, phone numbers, and email addresses. In terms of engaging with our community, we provide you with an opportunity to speak when you first join our membership. We also offer you various speaking opportunities, whether through the ZIP committee or maybe on a panel during one of our conferences. One of the great values in terms of monetary saving is the discount you get for our annual conferences and webinars. We also offer our member exclusive sponsorship opportunities, and we can facilitate introduction to other members, whether you want to meet an OEM or you need access to a transit agency in terms of their planning efforts. The last thing I wanted to talk about is that from time to time, CUTRIC issues RFP, and CUTRIC members can get ahead and bid on these projects. So far, CUTRIC has around 14 projects that are managed by our consultant team, and many of our members had an opportunity to participate in these bids. I can name Deloitte, EcoCharge, Almon, HDR, and several other members. Next slide, please. So in terms of learning and resources, if that's your interest, CUTRIC will give you access to consultation reports from our members, all the technical planning sessions. Also, CUTRIC published knowledge series that talks about low carbon and smart mobility that covers battery electric buses, hydrogen fuel cell, and also connected and autonomous shuttle technologies. Another valuable resource for our members is the Canadian ZIP database, which is Canada's first comprehensive tracking the state of transit electrification in Canada, and you can access the report, or we will grant you access to a dashboard so you can learn what's happening in Canada within the space. We also offer you an opportunity to learn about emerging technologies, whether when we introduce new members or during one of our committees. I also want to point out that we have a director of innovation at CUTRIC, and he's leading two initiatives. One of them is the academic and research initiative. CUTRIC has collaborated with 2 dozen universities and colleges, and we help them apply for funding for certain research projects. We also work with organization in smart rail innovation. And we help them apply for funding or basically do information or session to develop informational programs that can help develop commercialization projects. Next slide, please. One area of operation for CUTRIC that benefited all of our transit agencies are our consultant services. We have a talented group of people that provide predictive modeling for the zero-emission bus technologies. So we have a robust assessment that helps develop these modeling plans, and it's part of the requirement when a transit agency wants to apply for the zero-emission transit fund. And we can model not only battery electric buses, hydrogen fuel cell, autonomous vehicle, and other technologies as well. And every member, especially OEM who join our consortium, we actually collaborate to obtain their information so we can incorporate that in our modeling. Part of the working of this consultant team is doing empirical validation. So our goal is to make sure that the operational data from these OEM is basically help us verify our modeling work. We also do lots of research, and CUTRIC itself does lots of CUTRIC funded research, and our members can participate in some of these projects. And one of the key values as a member is being able to participate in a consortium led FRP. So our consultant team typically can do all the modeling work, but from time to time, the scope might be out of our expertise. So we reach out to our members and ask them if they're interested in participating in these RFP. Next slide, please. So the last couple of things that might not be very visible, especially to our members, that CUTRIC have invest lots of advocacy and lobbying efforts. So we engage our CUTRIC members in formulating the messages we convey to decision maker at various levels of the government. We try to influence policy discussion at different levels to advance what our members dictate. Also, we hold this lobby day opportunity where we expose CUTRIC members to ministers and senior decision makers. And the last value of our membership is an opportunity to be part of a project development project. Today's webinar will focus on the Pan-Canadian battery electric bus, but CUTRIC also has a number of project development opportunities, including the hydrogen fuel cell, autonomous vehicle, and the big data. Next slide, please. So before I let you go, there's a couple of really key events happening. We have a webinar which taking place on February 22nd, which will focus on high frequency rail. We have speakers, Alstom Rail and International Union of Railways. You can register for this webinar through the link that will be dropped in the chat. Also, our annual Smart Rail Conference will be taking place on March 20th. It's a virtual event, and we have speakers like Transport Canada, Ricardo, Alstom, HATS, Railway Association, and CSA, among other panelists as well. You can register for the conference through our website or through the link that we dropped now. And the last event, which is happening in the fall, is our flagship, the Zero Emission Transit and Mobility Conference. And that's taking place in Burlington again this year. I want to point out that the early bird prices are still available. So if you want to buy your ticket, please go to the website. Members, as always, have a special discount for these events. That would be it. Thank you so much. Back to you, Jess.
Thank you so much, Majdi. So now we're going to move into discussing the overview of our phase one. So we publicly launched phase one in 2019, and you'll see here, there's a few of the news articles when we did the launch. So you can move into the next slide. So with our phase one, we actually had our project partners are listed here. So we've got transit agencies that took part in our phase one, Brampton Transit, TransLink, York Region Transit were our three transit agencies that kind of pioneered this project. Manufacturers that took part in this project, we had New Flyer, Nova Bus, ABB, and Siemens. For utility, we had Newmarket Power Distribution was part of this project as well. And then, of course, CUTRIC. Move to the next slide. So in our phase one, the main focus of this project was to standardize one technical standard and demonstrate the interoperability of buses and high-powered chargers. The interoperability is referring to the ability for buses and chargers of different manufacturers to work together seamlessly. And the project used the Opt2Charge protocol that was developed through the Volvo Group in Europe and then was shared as open source and modified for North American deployment. And it went from the Opt2Charge protocol to J3105, and CUTRIC was part of that standards committee of the J3105 with the Society of Automotive Engineers providing data and information. So the standardization for this is no longer an issue because of this project. So the work that happened within our phase one of the project resolved the issues, and now it's a pretty standard practice. You can move to the next slide. So this is a high-level overview of kind of the growth within the project. So when the project launched, we had TransLink, who had 2 of the high-powered chargers, as well as 4 buses. York Region Transit, they started with 2 routes in the beginning. Throughout the project, they actually grew to have 20 routes that had incorporated into this project. They had 1 of the high-powered chargers. They started with 6 buses and they added an additional 6. You'll see my little dotted line there showing the addition. So they had a full 12 buses that were part of this project. With Brampton Transit, we had 4 chargers and 8 buses, and they've been running those on 2 routes. You can move to the next slide. So our empirical analysis reports, this is really the kind of some of the meat of our phase 1 of this project. Those were completed with an overall goal. What we wanted was 30 months of data for each transit agency. So you'll see with TransLink, with York Region Transit, and with Brampton Transit, kind of the span of the time frame in which that data collection was taking place. And we've now wrapped up all of the data collection for those 3 transit agencies. Next slide. So some of the data that we collected in this project with the total power data from the bus and the third-party loggers, pre-charging downtime, after charging downtime, GPS data, accelerator pedal data, and charger data. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to turn the mic over to my colleague Bernard, who's going to talk a little bit about some of the data and kind of what we had seen.
Thank you, Jeff. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So as Jeff mentioned, we followed the battery electric fleets of 3 transit agencies, Brampton, York Region, and TransLink. And the fleets that we followed were all a mixture of New Flyer and Nova Bus vehicles. So for Brampton Transit, we followed 8 vehicles utilized over 2 routes and using charging infrastructure, 1 Siemens charger and 3 ABB chargers. For TransLink, we followed 4 BBs utilized on 1 route using 1 Siemens charger and 1 ABB charger. And then for York Regional Transit, we followed 12 BEVs applied across 11 regular transit routes and 9 school routes, utilizing 1 Siemens on-route charger. Some of the results that we collected include GHG savings. So for Brampton Transit, we calculated a savings of 991 tons of CO2 equivalent that were not emitted. So that, in other words, that is approximately equivalent to not burning 112,000 gallons of gasoline. Similar, we had for TransLink a GHG savings of 629 tons of CO2 equivalent, or not burning 71,000 gallons of gasoline. And finally, for York Regional Transit, we calculated 721 tons of CO2 equivalent saved, or 81,000 gallons of gasoline reduced. I'll give this back to you, Jeff.
Thank you so much, Bernard. So now we're going to actually hand the mic over to our first speaker today. We have Gerald from Brampton Transit. And if you remember, Brampton Transit was one of those 3 transit agencies that were part of this project.
Thanks, Jess. Hey, everyone. My name is Gerald. I'm program leader for zero emissions mobility for the city of Brampton. I started in Brampton in July, and I'm really happy that I'm being part of this electrification journey. Thanks, CUTRIC, for inviting us to present our data and our slides. Next slide, please. We have 2 videos right now, so please do enjoy our video. It's a short video, then we'll talk more about our electrification journey to our phase 1 trial. Adam, can you please play the video? Next video, please.
CUTRIC's Pan-Canadian battery electric bus demonstration and integration trial was a world-first innovation project that standardized the charging systems from different manufacturers. The project created the foundation for successful interoperability between bus and charging manufacturers and has set the world stage for future collaboration for charging standards and battery electric bus deployments. Launched in 2016, the Pan-Canadian Battery Electric Bus Demonstration and Integration Trial used vehicles and infrastructure from New Flyer, Nova Bus, ABB, and Siemens to successfully deploy 18 buses and 7 chargers in Vancouver, Brampton, and York region.
This is really an ongoing process. And so while we're really excited that all the stakeholders, including ourselves, are finally deploying zero-emission buses at scale and we're finally reaching that critical mass, this is still very much a learning experience, and we're happy to be with our customers and with other stakeholders along the way to make sure that we get the best product and that we get to net zero.
During the course of the trial, transit agencies saw a total savings of 2,341 tons of carbon, equivalent to 263,400 gallons of consumed gas.
But on these pieces of new technology that we're bringing into operations that are new for some of these suppliers to bring out to the market, this ecosystem that we created through the Ebus pilot has been really helpful for us to establish even stronger relationships, because we're both in it for long-term success.
To be able to really make an impact on climate change, we need to be able to generate momentum. And momentum is generated by like-minded companies getting together and taking action. And this is what we're doing with CUTRIC, and this is what this Pan-Canadian project represents.
The trial has accelerated and drastically reduced the cost of transit electrification across Canada, bringing the country closer to a net zero future.
Above all, this has been an opportunity to learn together. Transit agencies, bus builders, infrastructure providers, coming together to pioneer, test, to learn, and ultimately to make transit electrification work here in Canada.
The Pan-Canadian Electric Bus Project has been going on for over 5 years from start to finish. There was a lot of planning work, a lot of lobbying, a lot of government advocacy, and for the last 3 years has been mostly monitoring the 18 buses and 7 overhead chargers that are in Brampton, Vancouver, and York region to see how they're actually operating. Standardization leads to interoperability, and that means the buses and the chargers are built to the same specifications. They can plug and play. That leads to more competition, leads to prices reducing. That's what we all want in transit, and that is what the Pan-Canadian Electric Bus Demonstration and Integration Trial achieved.
As you can see, we've come a long way from day one of the trial until the 30-month point last year. So we launched our phase 1 BEB trial starting July 2021, and it just finished last December. We deployed 8 BEBs, 276 kilowatt hour and 6 213 kilowatt hour. We have 4 high-powered chargers located at the city of Brampton. One is in our facility, Sandalwood, which everybody saw in the video. That was featured on the video. Next slide, please. We launched our routes, 23 Sandalwood. We route 6 New Flyer buses in that route. Still ongoing with the routes for those 6 buses. It's 59, almost 60 kilometers return. The next one is our Mount Pleasant Village. It's a shorter route because of the battery. And we're looking forward on expanding our routes as we go on with our electrification journey. Next slide, please. Our chargers are located at there's two chargers at Mount Pleasant. They're 450 kilowatt hour. We just finished maintaining it, and I will tell everyone in this webinar right now that the birds love those chargers. We cleaned up a couple of birds' nests. There's no birds, but there is birds' nest. The other one that we have is our Queen Street and Highway 50. It's another 450 kilowatt charger in that location. We have our challenges in there, so if anybody wants to talk offline what challenges we went through, I'll be more than happy to. I'll be more than happy to answer those questions. Another charger is located at our Sandalwood facility. It's by Siemens. It's also a 450 kilowatt hour. And we have our CPE charger at 250 inside our facility for slow charging. Next slide. As just mentioned, phase one, there's the key objective is interoperability between transit agencies. Everybody saw in the video that a lot of transit agencies have been to Brampton testing our chargers in multiple locations. Fairly recently, Gulf Transit came to Brampton to test the interoperability of their Nova bus. It worked out perfectly, and we're happy with the results with that one there. Next slide, please. A lot of benefits came out during the phase one trial. Program management, risk sharing, relationship building was very critical. As transit agencies moving towards electrification, it's very important that we come together as a team, coming up with the best solution possible. And again, like we're just stronger if we're together. And also advocacy for funding, and also collaborative information sharing. When I started in Brampton, what I've noticed is every transit agency is willing to share their information or share their unique journey to electrification. And I think that's going to be playing a critical role as we move forward for full electrification in the near future. On the technical side, we had empirical data and also improvements on the OEM side, charger infrastructure, buses. Those are very critical because the technology improves every day, and if there's nobody trying out this new technology, there's no improvement that can come out of it. So I'm really thankful with this phase one trial. Next slide, please. What we've key lessons, we have to start early. There's a lot of ways in approaching how to start, but you got to start very early. The sector is evolving rapidly, coming from a battery electric bus to now the industry is talking about a hydrogen bus. Change management is very critical for bigger transit agencies, for all the transit agency. We need to adjust as we advance to the biggest technological advancement in basically history. We have to plan ahead and make sure that all the old things that we used to do might not work with the new technology. So we have to adjust to those. And we had to make sure that all our fundings are approved so that the journey will be smoother. On the technical side, there's a lot of safety that came out of it, like arc flash, lockout tagouts, thermal events. Trooper performance, as everybody saw, that we have two types of buses. There's empirical performance that came out of it, and there's analysis. Unplanned downtime, those chargers were installed on unique locations, and sometimes those chargers will encounter faults, humidity, or just basically the nature on where it's installed. KPIs, we're still under the development of KPIs for the infrastructure, but it's going to be in alignment with all the agencies that are involved. We have our MDBF, identifying the changes that we have to do to ensure that we have a great mean distance between failure. Warranty is always critical to the operation. We have to make sure that we have our base warranty covered or extended, and we have to make sure that we have to keep up with our preventative maintenance, and we have to make sure that communication is the key for support regarding our infrastructure. Next slide, please. Our leader, Scott Gilner, is on the call right now. He's our manager for transit sustainability innovation. And again, my name is Gerald. Feel free to reach us at any time. I would love to answer any questions that come up. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much, Gerald. And so what we'll do is we'll have an opportunity for a few questions later. So if there are any questions that you have come to mind while Gerald was doing the presentation, feel free to maybe jot those down on a piece of paper. When we get to our Q&A section, there will be an opportunity to ask those. So we're going to shift now to our speaker, Sunny, with the CSA group. I feel like anytime we start talking about standards and recommendations, CSA group feels like a natural fit to engage this phase 2 of our project. So Sunny, I will hand the mic to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good afternoon and good morning to some of the folks. My name is Sunny Tard, and I'm part of the Alternative Energy Vehicles group under the Fuels and Transportation at CSA. So I'll be taking the next few minutes to walk you through a quick overview on the initiative that we have underway, as well as some of the work that we've taken with CSA. Just hold it there. Thanks. So with the quick overview, I mean, CSA, Canadian Standards Association, is comprised of two organizations, typically the Standards Development and the Testing, Inspection and Certification, which we call it the TIC. Our mission is to enhance the lives of the Canadians through advancement of standards in the public and the private sectors. Looking at more specifically to the slide, we're leading and extensively working in the following areas of standards, research, development, and education and advocacy. When we look at the standards development component of it, we're developing the product and the systems safety standards in compliance with the Canadian Electrical Code, Part 1, that are intended to protect people and properties from shock and the fire hazards. And naturally, as Gerald also alluded to, there's a lot of learnings that we're coming across. Even with the new emerging areas, when we look at the research aspect of it, where we are able to explore potential standards gaps and solutions, as well as find and conform some of the requirements that could serve as a minimum benchmark for standardization effort. Speaking of the other two pillars of education and advocacy, I mean, the recommendations with the standards development help us formulate some of the training content, as well as, increase the user knowledge of standards with our users and readers. We are also able to position ourselves, with the guiding the accurate application in workplace and communities where safety is paramount. Advocacy, it helps us to, drive public awareness of our standards and solutions that we're providing into the industry, and promote the value and use of standards, as well as engage with some of the developers and users. Specifically with the advocacy, I think we're doing a lot of good work when it comes to, whether it's the municipal, provincial, and the federal regulations and policies. So it's helping us to position well in the industry as we move forward. The next slide, please. So the initiative that I was referring to earlier, we have underway is the code that we're currently working on, which is the Battery Electric Vehicle Maintenance and Storage Facility Code. The next one. And how the need of this initiative was kicked off is, I'm not certain if most of the folks are familiar that we currently have our B401 series, which that we felt was the most appropriate route to move forward, which talks about the existing maintenance facility codes. So the existing two codes that we have active at the moment focus more on the natural gas and the propane vehicle maintenance aspect of it, while the other two initiatives that were assessed from this assessment and the initiation workshops at CSA and the coordination internally was to have a maintenance facility code, which would be focused on the hydrogen vehicle as well as the battery electric vehicle maintenance facility code, which we're working on currently at CSA. I'll be speaking more with the B401.4 initiative that we have currently in play. The next slide, please. So what we had was naturally we engaged stakeholders in having a lot of these informed decisions and discussions on the lessons learned as a lot of the piloting projects were taking place. We did include the manufacturers as well as the utilities and the appropriate parties, trying to bring in information that how we can formulate the requirements and recommendations for vehicle maintenance, depot and support facility design for this code, which will have the battery electric and the hybrid fleet vehicles that are being charged, stored, maintained, repaired, of that nature. Now, naturally, the recommendations are, critical. It's critical to focus on some aspects when it comes to charging, electrical shock, with the rising cases of the fire detection. It's also important to have some of these requirements in terms of suppression as well as emergency response planning. So we were able to conduct this very fruitful discussion and establish the scope of this maintenance facility code as we move forward with this initiative. And what the code will do is naturally introduce any requirements on these areas where the flash control facility, fire detection, suppression, and emergency response can be laid out, as well as referring to some of the existing standards and codes that we can consolidate as a direct reference for the folks, to bring in as much information as possible for this initiative. One quick note as the last thing is you could see the status of this is we are currently developing a seed material for this as the scope was finalized with a handful of stakeholders. And as we move forward on this journey, we're going to be utilizing some of that seed content and kicking off the initiative on this standards work in March. And that's what we have planned at the moment. Next slide, please. Here's a quick snapshot here. I mean, naturally with CSA being involved in a lot of the areas, I think this was a great infographic for me to just share that we are doing extensive work when it comes to battery management systems or vehicle charging, when it comes to the adapters, couplers, and so, as well as various areas of energy storage. And with the greater need for battery, and especially in the medium and heavy duty applications, our B401 series is something that's, picking up a lot of traction, and we're looking forward to providing more of an update as well as refined solutions through that code. Okay, next slide, please. And I know it was short on time here, but definitely if you have any questions or comments, by all means, you can reach us. Myself, you can reach me. My email and information is here. We'll be happy to assist you. If there's anything that you would like to share as well, by all means, please feel free. Do not hesitate and feel free to contact me as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sunny. And Sunny, hopefully you'll have an opportunity to stick around for a Q&A at the end as well, just in case anyone has any questions for you. So we'll move into discussing our phase 2. And now the order for the next little bit may seem a little confusing because I'm going to talk about our phase 2 and what's coming down the pipe. And then based on timing, our CEO, Josepa Petrinik, was not able to join a little earlier. So then she's going to be stepping in and talking a bit about historical phase 1, 2, and 3 after I complete this. So for phase 2, we're unleashing this at this point. What we've done in the steps to get here, we've collected phase 1 feedback. So a lot of the things that we've already noted in our phase 2 is coming directly from items that's been identified in our phase 1. We've also conducted some pretty comprehensive meeting with all of our phase 1 collaborators to make sure that kind of everything they wanted to see there is there, to make sure there's no large things that they wanted to make sure is part of our phase 2 and anything that may have popped up along the course of that project. We've also initiated discussions with additional transit agencies and manufacturers. So we've been having conversations with lots of different folks, transit agencies that weren't part of phase 1, transit agencies that we think could fit within this. Honestly, anyone who has a battery electric bus on the road right now, I'd love to see be a part of our phase 2. Obviously, more data means more knowledge for us. And as well as manufacturers that may see themselves as a fit within some of the scope of our phase 2 as well. We've also been engaging with CSA to gather some valuable insights. Noted that they spoke here today. So actually, can we go back just one more thing to talk about on that last slide? So some of the benefits of joining phase 2. So our commercialization projects are for CUTRIC members only. So these are closed door projects. And what that means when you're a member of CUTRIC and you join one of the commercialization projects, that means that you have access to the results before the rest of CUTRIC's membership. So essentially all of the learnings and all of the knowledge sharing will happen within that commercialization project, this one being our Ebus phase 2. And then it will be disseminated after the close of the project to the rest of CUTRIC's membership. It becomes part of things like our ZEB committee and things of that nature. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so our Ebus Phase 2 is meant to answer critical issues associated with the lessons learned from our Phase 1. And that particular phase ran from 2016 to 2023. You'll see noted earlier that the public launch was in 2019, but the actual work on this project began in 2016. And the outcomes from the first part of Phase 2, which is empirical work and research, is structuring our Phase 2 Ebus deployment project with the intentions on kind of the deployment project having potentially energy as a service integration and or autonomous electric bus to charger integration. So some of the things that we've identified as being of value for our Phase 2, and you'll see here the little note on the bottom that these are subject to change based on new information. We're still developing out the scope. So the empirical analysis work will be looking at battery degradation, so battery health, temperature, the battery life is something we're looking at. Additionally, we're going to be doing empirical analysis. We're going to be testing the J3105 supplements. So things like sequential charging. And additionally, we're going to have reports that are going to be producing recommendations, vehicle efficiency, battery recycling opportunities, thermal management, addressing range barriers, cybersecurity standards, support for extended operations, and in-depot pantographs, low-powered solutions for this one as well. Next slide. So moving on to a bit of our next steps. So like I had kind of identified, that was a bit of the overview of what we're going to be looking at, but additional items can be added to this. So we are still building out that. So for next steps, we're going to be doing outreach to Canadian transit agencies with battery electric buses in service is what we're interested in. And you'll also see there'll be a link that will be dropped momentarily in the chat. So folks have an opportunity to fill out our Google form. There, I see it looks like it's come into the chat now. Fill out a Google form. It allows you to kind of express if you're interested, a little bit of an opportunity for some feedback. We're doing consultation sessions with CUTRIC members interested in joining to find out any additional elements that they would like to see added to that scope of work. We're also going to be collaborating with AIEQ to expand our reach within Quebec. They're going to be coming on as a project partner in our Phase 2. And so I'm going to be looking at scheduling individual meetings with those interested transit agencies so we can really have some one-on-one time to talk about what you would like to see, maybe feedback on our Phase 1. And then we'll be drafting and executing a scope of work and MOU for the project. And then obviously we're jumping into the launch. So I will pause there and I'm just going to check if we have Josepa on the line. If we do, wonderful. All right, I will hand the mic over to Josepa, who's going to talk about that historical.
Great. Thanks so much, Jess. So hopefully everybody can hear me loud and clear. And what I'm going to do now is go from what Jess was saying about the research that we'll be doing in what we call the Phase 2 Ebus, but it's kind of part A of Phase 2 because we're going back to the future. We're essentially going to be using that work with our transit agencies and manufacturers to flesh out new things that we've learned from Ebus Phase 1, which many of you will recall and has probably been discussed earlier in this webinar, involved ABB and Siemens and New Flyer Nova Bus for interoperability and standardization. And we're going to be going back to what our original Phase 2 and Phase 3 of those commercial projects were intended to be. And this is where classic CUTRIC style, we're going to be bringing our manufacturers together with transit agencies to go and do what we originally intended to do and actually even won federal money to do in multiple cities back in 2018 and 2020. So just to remind everybody, again, not to repeat too much of what's been said, our Phase 1 commercialization project focused on that overhead pantograph style charger, interoperability with the buses. And for those of you who were part of CUTRIC back in those years, it was highly controversial. We've been able to get that out the door, demonstrate those data, as Jess has referred to, demonstrate performance and be able to articulate performance issues with transit agencies and manufacturers working together hand in hand. And the result of that has been J3105 overhead charging standard being published, which everybody's purchasing now in their standards. Going forward, to remind everybody, and if you weren't part of CUTRIC back in 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, you won't know this, but we actually started phase 2 already robustly and aggressively with a half a dozen transit agencies. We won $5 million for phase 2. It was ready to roll. And phase 2 was always intended to take those Nova Bus and New Flyer buses and potentially add in additionally any new manufacturers coming to the table. And at that time, there was BYD and Proterra, among others, starting to ramp up operations in North America. And the intention was that these overhead chargers, of course, as today, they're drawing power right from the grid. They need smart charging controls. And the idea was integrating energy storage at the transit agency. So piggybacking on what Tesla was doing for cars, but large scale industrial, seeing if transit agencies could become the owner operators of their own energy storage devices, largely intended to buttress and demand mitigate the power being drawn from the grid directly on their overhead chargers, in particular the high power chargers. But as we went forward into 2019 and 2020 and started doing a lot of modeling work, it was patently clear to us and our transit partners that the storage was also needed for depot charging. And for those of you who have deployed electric buses, you know very well those demand charges are aggressive and they eat up a lot of savings, and they are a high cost to deal with. So fast forward to where we are. Well, actually, to stay in the past just quickly, we put that bid through and we had transit agencies. Some of you may not recall, but we had Halifax Transit, Burlington Transit, and Brampton Transit part of that project. And we went off to the federal government and asked for money from Natural Resources Canada to pay for energy storage devices that would be installed at those depots to be able to support both high power charging and low power charging in early deployments of buses. And we won $5 million from that federal program. And the only reason that project did not deploy, well, the two reasons. One was that our phase 1 had been delayed because the provincial government in Ontario had changed colors. And as a result of that, some funding for phase 1 disappeared and we had to go back to the federal table for the phase 1. By the time the phase 1 money got out the door for Brampton Transit, the time had passed for NRCan to allow us to delay the use of the $5 million. So we missed the window because of essentially politics. We were able to get out the door with phase 1, but that $5 million then disappeared as a result. And going back to the table, then the pandemic struck. So two things happened at the same time. I think we still would have gotten an extension from the federal government had the pandemic not hit, and then just caused a massive refocus at transit agencies, causing us another year delay and losing in the technology planning. But the project still holds. And despite the fact that energy as a service has emerged as a really great solution, potentially as a viable solution to take the issue of energy storage off the hands of transit agencies, it's also clear to us that some transit agencies will not buy into, or may not need, or it may not be appropriate to buy into energy as a service in the future. And that ownership and operation of energy storage may still be a needed solution. And so same issue, the intention of the project was to standardize energy storage operations, integration into charging and depot facilities at the depot, and to demonstrate the performance of this. What might shift now going forward as we bring this project back from the dead, because it's still a live and necessary project, what may shift here is that there could be a multiplicity of owner operators. It might not be just the transit agency, it might be an energy as a service consortium. So that project is coming back. And then the intention, of course, coming out of the phase 2 desk research that Jess went through, was fleshing out the details for phase 3 that was always in the works, which is to automate the buses so that they're pulling in and out of chargers in driverless mode. So those things are coming back. If we can go to the next slide, just to share with folks, if you didn't know that prehistory, you won't know why we're coming back to these projects now. We spent just a ton of effort and time in those projects. Transit agencies wanted them, utilities wanted them. It's why we have a utility division at CUTRIC. Bringing it back from the dead means reviving something that we still see as critical and needed. And this is just a summary of the original phase 1 project partners that we brought into phase 2. And folks may not remember, there was a whole consortium of academic partners part of phase 1. Those academic partners have indeed finished just a ton of research. We got money for them to do on electric bus standardization and performance and optimization. Those studies are now being published information have been published in the last 2 years. We are bringing back our academic committees that are focused on electric bus, charger, and energy storage integration. So stay tuned for that information. But essentially, we're going back to the table saying we're going to recreate this consortium model again. So we'll be reaching out to our members in good standing in the manufacturing world to say who wants to be part of phase 2 and phase 3 now going forward. If you go forward one more slide. And we'll also be bringing, of course, our academic partners into it. This gives you a sense of the phase 1 project, which was over $40 million in the end. Our intention was, well, and it ultimately achieved 20 buses. Our intention originally was 16 buses, and we got to 18 buses, and then some of the transit agencies purchased more buses during the project. We did achieve 7 overhead chargers, and we did have 5 research organizations part of it. So it was successful. Now the question is, of course, next steps, and that's why Jess reviewed first the desktop research that we'll do with AIEQ to answer all the things we didn't know 6 years ago, all those scope elements that we need to know before we launch energy storage integration in situ and for real life with our partners or automated bus controls. But we're going to start the commercialization process in parallel with the desk research. If we go forward to the next slide to give sense of the phase 2 timeline, this is the phase 2 stakeholders who were part of that phase 2 bid we put through to the federal government. And folks may forget because, you know, the pandemic has kind of washed our brains of a lot of history, but we had a whole bunch of utilities that were part of that project. We had Metrolinx indicating that it wanted to see how energy storage integration could work at the depot and stations. We had a whole host of transit agencies that were part of those bids that went into the federal government or were part of the second round to go into the federal government if and when we won the federal funding, which we ended up winning. And then we had a whole bunch of manufacturing partners and a lot larger group than in the phase 1 project. So we're going to be reaching out to all of these partners again, saying, do you want to come back in? Some of them have changed. I mean, TM4 is now Dana, for example. Cummins has hoovered up Hydrogenics, of course. So there's been some shifts in the marketplace, but we'll be going back to each of these, plus some of the new partners that are members of ours right now and reviving the dialogue with transit. Some of these transit agencies won't need this anymore. You know, TTC has an energy as a service solution, and that may be and probably is sufficient for them. But for some of the other transit agencies, like the Londons of the world, potentially some of the other smaller mid-size agencies that we work with right now on procurement, it is very likely that that solution still is a necessary one to test out. So we'll go forward one more slide. If you see what our original timeline was, we already went through phase 2. We went through the whole 2018 process. We actually did locate the location. So I'm just bringing back some of these old decks to show you that our go, no go period was 2018. And we ended up with a go. And we had not only the federal support, but we had FCM supporting the project too. So the fact that we weren't able to use money that we actually had won already, we realized that we were ahead of the curve, and we were told by our transit agencies and manufacturers it was extremely cutting edge, and we were certainly way ahead of the curve. The market wasn't there yet, but that is absolutely CUTRIC's job, is to try to pull the market way forward from where it is, and then tether to that, trying to get government funding to fund the stuff that doesn't exist off the shelf right now, in particular the systems integration. So if you go forward one more slide, and I'll just conclude on where we're headed. Originally, phase 2 was a $75 million project. So the intention there was multiple transit agencies. In the Ebus phase 1, we had 3 transit agencies. In this one, we had 5 lined up, with 3 going into the NRCAM bid. The intention was 40 to 50 buses integrated, 7 to 10 overhead chargers, incorporating the ones that already existed, 8 additional research organizations, and multiple energy storage devices. So battery devices intended to be energy storage and demand management mitigation systems. So if we move forward, we were on track, as I said, won that money, and then the pandemic hit. So we had to regroup, and we lost the time frame with the federal government. So ultimately, we already had selected routes. We already had selected routes of 22 kilometers one way or 44 kilometers round trip baked into blocks. We already had identified the public exposure routes that would be good for PR. We had already priced out the civil works. We already had linked it to municipal plans. We already had local utility leads in each of the transit agency zones. And we had identified the high ridership routes that mapped onto those blocks that would work for an energy storage device tethered to an en route charger solution. If we go forward one slide. We're bringing all of this back, which is the purpose of us flagging this. Essentially, the intention here is to indicate to our members that the phase 2 project that Jess is referring to does involve the desk research we've got to do, but the intention there is within this year to bring back these really intense multi-million-dollar commercialization projects, energy storage integration with a possible place for energy as a service vendor operator as part of that, which is new compared to 2019 and 2020, and also bringing back the automated bus controls integrated with the en route or depot high power chargers for driverless pantograph connection. So that gives folks a little bit of an indication of where we're going with this. I expect that the phase 2 Ebus project in situ with the transit agencies demonstrated out will be about $100 million project. So basically double the size of our Ebus project. I expect the automated bus project will be in and around that zone as well, possibly up to 150 million. So we're entering into that zone of project work. And once you enter into that zone of project work, we're looking at not just funds that exist through the Zero Emissions Transit Fund for capital acquisition for the time that it still exists into 2025, but of course we'll be liaising with and really aggressively trying to approach the Canada Infrastructure Bank on a potential finance with grants if it doesn't work out program with the Canada Infrastructure Bank, and then direct lobbying with ministers, because projects of this type do take direct lobbying. There's no easy package of funding set up provincially or federally to support this. The intention is Canadian, so we're not limiting it to Ontario, for example. And as I noted in our original phase 2, Halifax was part of it, and the province was quite supportive at that time. So with that, I will turn it back to our team that's leading the call here and see if we have time for any last questions.
And Yosepa, before you disappear on us, Fatima, if you can go back to slide 46, there was one question. If you could explain what platooning is.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And then I do see a couple quick Q&As. So the platooning piece was around the automated vehicles. The intention here is very similar to if you're paying attention to automated trucking right now. The idea is that you have one transit vehicle in front with a driver and the rest follow. And it's like an LRT without tracks. So each bus behind the lead bus, which has a driver, is automatically connected. And through a combination of LiDAR and radar and camera controls and object detection, the standard AV tech that's out there right now, I should say standard in quotations, the intention is that you could have 3, 4, 5 electric buses following each other. You get the capacity of an LRT without tracks. So some of the considerations there are dedicated, semi-dedicated laneway, or you have it on track dedicated for transit, like what OC Transpo has. That's an optimal allocation, or what York Region Transit has. And where you do have to have break-off points, you would have break-off points where the lead vehicle is breaking off from the platooned vehicles at a facility turn-off. So something where you're basically reducing, to be frank, your driver costs. You have a driver at the front and the rest are platooned, and you don't have the cost of an LRT, but it's electrified. That's where we're going with phase 3. And that's where we were going with phase 3 back in 2016, 2017. Clearly ahead of the curve, but I do believe this has to get out the door. It is a solution for Canada. So that's what we refer to there. Jess, I do see a couple other questions. If you want me to just try and whip answers out there very quickly. The one question about is hydrogen included? Yeah, the answer is yes. So originally phase 2 was intended around battery energy storage, and that is still a core component, but it is very clear that hydrogen as an energy as a service for hydrogen, as well as potentially hydrogen on site generation and storage, is a potential player here. So we're going to open it up to both, because both are coming through our pipeline right now. And then we were asked if here additional transit agencies are potentially able to join. Absolutely. So this is the intention, is to go back to basics. We've got a cohort of several dozens of transit agencies at CUTRIC. We are starting there because we know they're champions. We know they've got to do this. And then we're going to be reaching out beyond our membership to see, does any other transit agency want to do this and does not have the technical support? There is safety in numbers. And so we would invite those transit agencies in. We always have a go, no go period. So just to clarify to folks, when we do these commercial projects, we usually start off with like 10, 12 transit agencies that want to be part of it. And through a series of really aggressive technical development, we end up usually with 3 to 4 at the end that say, yeah, we can do it. With the cost, the complexity, the staff, and what we need to do, we can do it. And that's normal. That's a normal progression. So we're comfortable with that pathway. We'll start with a big tent. And then as we go through the no go decision-making in the next year, some will drop off to come back back when it's established in the market. And that's okay. That's our role at CUTRIC, and that's how we roll. So over to you, Jess. I think I got most of the questions.
Perfect. I believe you did. I do see the one you answered around hydrogen did have a little note there with CSA ahead. So maybe I'll pause and see if Sunny wants to give a response from CSA's group's opinion on that one as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I did respond to that, Jess, that there will be two initiatives, one primarily focusing on the hydrogen vehicle aspect, and the second one will be more so on the battery electric vehicles, maintenance facilities, and storage code. Naturally, both of the initiatives are being conducted in parallel, but there will be some synergies that we're going to be, reflecting on with the group of our interested parties and the information as it flows. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Sunny, thanks for that. Jess, I do see one last question. We're a manufacturer. Do we have to be a member of CUTRIC to be part of phase 2 and 3? Yes, you do. It's a membership-based organization. So we do work for our members. Their membership fees pay for our salary to do the work. So I don't know anybody out there willing to work for free these days, really. And so as a result, the membership buys you the ability to be part of the project. And depending on the specification, it's like a standards group. And Sunny, you'll have this experience. You've got lots of folks at the table. Not everybody will agree with the specification that comes out the door, especially if it's competitors at the table. That's natural. And that is part of our commercialization projects. We work as much as possible to get something out the door that will work for the marketplace long term. It may not be always the only solution or the right solution for your company, but the only way to know is to buy in at the start to be part of that decision-making profile.
Wonderful. And I do see a question here as well. Somebody asking if they'll have access to the recording. So this recording after today's webinar will be going on our YouTube channel, and I'm going to share the link there for you. So you'll have access to that within the next couple of days as soon as we can clean it up and get it uploaded. So.
Very good. And Jess, we should note that as we move into the commercialization consultations, again, we start with our members, but we will make sure to invite to the initial kickoff consultations, non-members as well, so that you know what's happening. And that gives you eyes wide open as to whether it's worth your investment. If the technology is down a pathway that you're not developing, it's not worth your investment. But if it's going down a technology pathway where you're playing in the business world and you're trying to make a buck off it, it's probably worth your investment to be at the table.
Absolutely. And I see one more question that popped in, Josetta, if you want to grab that one. Just a question, how do academic institutions support this second phase?
Yeah, Sandra, great question. And so it's a bit of back to the past again. So several years ago when we started these projects, we had I don't know, 20 academic institutions across Canada as members, universities and colleges. None of them had done work in this space. Some had done electric car, but none on bus chargers, utility stuff. So we put together the committee, we went off and got a bunch of money, and all of them got money and they did a bunch of research. So the next phase now is we're going to start with our academic members, and Vince Guglielmo, who is our academic strategy lead, is reaching out this quarter to our academic universities and colleges. We're going to be walking you through, again, in detail, though, in more detail than today, what we're planning to do here commercially, and then getting your proposals of what your teams could do based on research you've done already, or if you're starting new teams in these spaces. We're then going to be collating all of those proposals as we have historically, putting together a direct ask to the federal government through the tri-councils to fund it as a group. And also, depending on the cluster of academics, if it lands in Ontario, BC, or Alberta, we also go to the province and ask for a chunk of change to basically fund that grouping of academic work under a portfolio. Our intention is that we are the place where all academics in Canada who work on electric bus integration and hydrogen energy storage integration get money to do their work. So that, Sandra, you'll get a direct invite to you and your team to partake in the original and the initial setup in the next quarter. And then you'll be invited to submit proposals, and you'll be invited into our lobby effort to get the money for the research.
Wonderful. And I'm just going to take a quick opportunity to thank the folks. I see a few folks are dropping off. So I wanted to make sure on the screen that you'll see there will be a survey that will pop up when the webinar closes and possibly when you log off as well. And my email address is located on the screen. We're hoping to hear from lots of folks today so we can have a lot of conversations, and we're happy to stay on for a few extra moments if there's any other questions that is coming in. And I see there's an anonymous one there. Is the performance data of transit agencies Ebus private or public access?
And let me quickly answer that because we've gone over time. So within a commercialization project, it is private to the partners in that project. So in the electric bus project we did with ABB and Siemens and New Flyer Nova Bus and Newmarket Tay and Brampton and York Region TransLink, so all those partners that Jess went through, they all got their detailed data according to what they owned. So the transit agencies got the reports for every manufactured product in their system. They could see all the details. The manufacturers got information that was aggregated and anonymized, so they could see the system performance because, of course, their competitors are at the table. And then the wider world is just starting to get the outcomes of it. Jess is leading that as part of even phase 2 and some of our webinars and ZEB committees coming up this year for our members. We're now starting to turn that aggregated anonymized data with permissions that were obtained last year in our electric bus steering committee into graphics and infomercials and reports that we're putting out into the world so the wider world can get access to a subset, because the subset of data is what we think the industry needs to know. But the detailed granular information at the time it was generated over the last 3 years to 4 years has been shared directly with the project partners in the project. So we're pretty strict about the non-disclosure. We want to make sure that manufacturers who are part of the project get the information they need to improve their products. That's the reason we do it, because we know this stuff often will not work. And the best way to make it work is get the data on how to fix it with all the problems. That has to happen. And we need to know that the transit agencies get the data first. That's highly granular so they can address their operations and work with manufacturers to fix things behind closed doors, and to be able to give everybody the best chance to survive and thrive. But then fast forward several years later, it's like cabinet records at the federal government. 50 years later, they become public. In our case, not so much, 50 years. In our case, it's more after the project closes. So Ebus phase 1 has now formally closed, and we're looking at what is aggregated, anonymized, and publicly acceptable to release that still informs the industry. Our members at CUTRIC, though, do get more information than the general public, and that's because it's pay to play. So the memberships are buying access to that unique information.